Welcome to the Nuclear Power Institute's The Path of Most Persistent podcast. The podcast highlighting individual stories of persistence, community outreach, and inspiration to support the continuing and emerging nuclear science and technology needs across the state of Texas. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed today's podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Path of Most Persistence. Today, we are delighted to have the most revered Bishop Gary Janak. Bishop Janak was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Victoria in 1988. He has served in the parishes of Victoria, Yoakum, and El Campo. He is the co-founder and the past executive director of the Emmaus Center, a counseling and spiritual direction center for the Diocese of Victoria. Just last month, he was consecrated as an auxiliary bishop for the Archdiocese of San Antonio. Bishop Janak holds graduate degrees in theology, canon law, and counseling, and is a licensed professional counselor for the state of Texas. And I must also add that he is a marathon runner. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Bishop Janak. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a privilege.
I just would like to timestamp the day because all of our videos go online and hopefully will be listened to and there forever. So today is May the 11th, 2021, and we are most happy to have you, not only because of the blessings that you're going to bring to us in the conversation, but also May is the month of mental health awareness, and we want to make sure that we take time to bring some light and sensitivities to this month. And we know you're probably one of the best people to have on to speak on the topic. So if you would, Bishop Janak, can you talk a little bit about that connection between mind, body, and soul? I think this whole year and a half of COVID and all the issues involving COVID and just out in the world, if it's political, social, emotional, we're all having challenges, and especially so many of our students and listeners. And if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Sure, Valerie. It's good to see you and all of those that are viewing. Indeed, when it comes to me from, of course, in my work, my personal life, my spiritual life, helping people as a priest and now as a bishop, but it's all biblically based. It's all there right there in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. St. Paul speaks so clearly about our mind, body, and soul connection. And that's how we were created. The Old Testament, especially Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, the Psalms speak about balance that's necessary in life, speaks about moderation, all things in moderation. The Bible doesn't kind of say, make sure that you're going to put yourself in a position where you're going to deny yourself. It says, enjoy the good things of life, but do it in moderation. And sometimes we kind of tip the scale one way or the other. And also, especially when we're stressed in these times of anxiety, this has been a very difficult time for everyone. And so I think mind, body, spirit is so important, the connection. And I've seen it in my own life. I've become a lot healthier as I have tried to live it in my own life, in terms of taking care of what I put into my mind, what I put into my body, and how it influences my soul, my spiritual life.
Bishop Janak, thank you. I do want to give a moment of transparency for our audience. We've known each other for quite some time. We grew up in the same small community of Palacios. We attended the same schools and the same parish. And I also had the good fortune of way back, I guess the late 90s, we both were getting our masters together in counseling. And I was always, when I walked in that first day and saw you in class, I was taken aback because at the time you were a priest. Sure. And I saw you there, and I remember distinctly asking you, Father Gary, what are you doing here? You're a priest. Why are you in these classes? And the words you said to me still stay with me to this day. You said, yes, Valerie, I am, but I really want to make sure that my techniques are the best, that I'm aware of what is effective, and I want to just be the best counselor I can to my parishioners. Right. And that meant so much to me, not only as someone that has known you and your wonderful family, but just as another professional, someone that is trying to improve themselves. So to me, that says so much. And obviously you knew very early on in your role, in your vocation of priesthood, the importance of counseling.
Right. I did. I did see that early on, and it's still this way today. I was ordained in 1988, so 33 years ago. We received 2 classes in pastoral counseling, one on just an introductory course and the second one on marriage. It wasn't sufficient. Today, it's still that way in many programs and seminaries. So a man is ordained a priest and think automatically, oh, he's a counselor. I found probably my second, third year in priesthood realizing I didn't have the skills necessary. There were the issues that changed so much. Things became more intense, especially with children having depression and anxiety and being overwhelmed with stress. Things that probably, Valerie, we didn't experience as much in growing up in our little coastal community. Family life has changed today, and so I realized I had to go back to school. And when I went, I discovered that I enjoyed it so much. And both of us had wonderful professors. And then I just went on and said, you know what, I'm going to go further. I'm going to go ahead and get licensed as well. And it was probably the best thing that I did for the people I serve, but also for myself. And they always say counselors really just go back to figure out themselves and try to heal themselves a little bit. And so I did. I learned a lot about what I needed in my life as a human being, as a man. And in the process, I hope I was able and am able to help other people. But I saw that early on, and that's why I eventually then helped to form the counseling center, because the needs were there. And they wanted something that was Christian-based. People said, we wanted to hear how God is involved in all of this. And that's why I see there's no distinction really at all. Psychology, which is the study of the soul, has everything to do with our spiritual life. And when I'm healthy mentally, and I can really be better spiritually as well. And people are discovering that.
I absolutely am in line with what you're saying. I know that I've been fortunate to receive a few degrees, and I will always tell people that the one I think has been most impactful to me was my counseling degree, because not only did it enlighten me in my own path in life, but it also informed me just as a colleague and as a mother, most importantly,
Sure.
and as a wife and a daughter and all those other roles that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But, Bishop Gary, I think in all my roles as an educator, and even today, and as these difficult times that we go through, I come across individuals and it's challenging, because we all go through, the hills and valleys of life. And some of us are blessed or have the good fortune to been given the gift of faith. Some have not. And I think for some that have never had that experience or have that gift, it's hard to sometimes articulate how to find a path that is that path or one similar. So how is it you as a bishop and as a priest, of course, how is that you can communicate hope and understanding to someone that maybe doesn't have the same religious background as you, or maybe perhaps isn't a Christian at all? How can you give them guidance?
I think it's about understanding that we have to feel comfortable with ourselves. Even if they're for those that do not believe at all, or others have maybe they're questioning their belief, or they have some type of understanding of higher power, but they do not call that God, or as we say as Christians, as followers of Jesus. But nonetheless, all of us are human beings, and we're all connected to each other. And so I think the balance is important for every one of us, whether we believe in God or not, whatever our background is. We all have a common understanding of who we are as human beings. And so in that understanding, I think anyone, I've spoken to people of all walks of life, people that believe in God, people that do not. I can get along with anyone for the most part. I'm truly blessed in that kind of way, because there's a common ground we can find. And that common ground is, how are we going to be the best person that we can be? I want to be the best person I can be, because I think that's what God is calling me to be. But for those who don't believe in God, they still want to be the best person. But it doesn't mean they want to be a person that is above someone else, or self-centered, or or someone who's egotistical or anything else. We all have the same common understanding, with or without belief, and that is we want to really be contributors to this world that we have and that we live in and that we share. And so I think the basic understanding, the commonality I find with people is balance in life, body, mind, and also humility. The very word humility comes from the word humus, which means of the earth. It means to be grounded. And so we're all called to be humble. We're all called to be good listeners. We're all called to be able to understand what it is to walk in someone else's shoes, and that's compassion and empathy. And so I try to get, when I'm with people that are not believers, I want to find a way that I can connect with them. And for the most part, people are good. And you can connect with them in that kind of way. And so, yeah, with or without belief, we still all have a need for a balance. I call it a sacred balance in life, and to find our way in this world that we live in.
That's beautiful. As I was reading the newsletter about your consecration as bishop, it's lovely and it's such good reading. I wanted to make sure that I was as current on your information as possible. One of the things, aspects or characteristics that people repeat about you is not only, I think you're sometimes referred to as the Flash, which is impressive. That apparently you were very, not only probably speedy in running, but also because you're so efficient in getting tasks accomplished and done. So my goodness, how wonderful.
I wish I was a Flash on the when I'm running, but I'm not. But in terms of conducting my daily work, yeah.
I was just giving you that, Bishop Gary. So, but one other characteristics people mention so many times about what a wonderful listener you are, that you have such a listener's heart, and I think that's one characteristic that we all can improve upon. Not in every role in our life, not only as colleagues, as my colleagues here today, we all want to be better team members, but in our families and just with our friends, being better listeners. And can you talk to us about the importance of listening, maybe looking out for certain concerns and those that we love, because we know that emotional health, spiritual health, so many of those things are really unseen. You really can maybe detect a pain someone is having through listening, not so much through seeing something. So can you talk about the importance of listening?
Absolutely, because it's the hardest thing that we do. I mean, it's the hardest thing. When I was in counseling before I moved to San Antonio, working at the center, I was exhausted at the end. I would work every Monday there in the center, and I needed to be exhausted. That means that perhaps I made a difference, because counseling is hard work, certainly. But it's taught me to be a listener means, one, we can't anticipate what we're going to say to the other person. We have to listen to what they're saying. Techniques that Valerie, you learned in being a counselor, things that they taught us. It doesn't come real natural for us to be listeners. And it's what's difficult, especially with young people. And maybe some college students are going to be listening to this, and that is our minds race 100 miles an hour. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of thoughts and words that come into our mind. And sometimes, how do we get to the point where we can just kind of settle into it and listen to someone else? And so that's the hard work, but the payoff is great, because I certainly teach that a lot with husbands and wives. It's like, if I can teach you how to listen better, you're going to be able to communicate better. Because all the word communication, the only thing that it means is common union. So I tell couples is that we can't talk or we fight all the time. It's just, do you have a common unity? That's what communication is. How can you relate to each other? And it begins with listening. And so the hard work is to try to focus on the other person. And we have, I think as human beings, kind of a tendency to be a little bit more self-centered, and we don't want to at times, et cetera, but it kind of comes within us as who we are. And so we have to be other-centered when we're listening. I can't anticipate every single thought that I'm going to have. I'm going to say, okay, are you finished that? Now it's my turn to talk. No, it's about being able to hear what the other one is saying. You can ask questions, certainly, without interrupting, but to be interested in what the other one is saying, not just interested in what I'm going to say to you. And the other, I think, effectiveness in listening And that is being able just to understand that we want to be interested in someone else. You know, if the conversation is always about me, then I'm not going to be a very good listener. I want to be interested in the other person. Let me ask them questions about themselves. Let me ask questions about what's going on in their world, whatever. And it'll come around to me. It always will. But let me model the kind of listening that maybe I want the other person to give to me as a gift. So listening is not easy. It's the hardest thing I do. And it's the hardest thing a husband and wife can do. It's the hardest thing that a student can do as well, and listening to professors and mentors, et cetera. And so that's why my motto when I became a bishop was from First Kings, and that is, give your servant a listening heart. And it's a Hebrew word which means leb shemaya, listening heart. And that's always struck me as something that I think we probably all could use a little bit more of, a listening heart, because we talk too much.
That is beautiful. And I think we can't emphasize that enough, because we all have that urgency to say what we're feeling. And we all, you hear so much about what you're entitled to do and what, you need to protect yourself and all the things, but it's really about listening to others. And I think too, when we listen to others, if we really try hard and remain silent and to listen, we also learn so much about ourselves, because you can see yourself in other people. I think the more clearly we see others, we can see ourselves a little bit more clear. And you mentioned couples a few times, and I know you have a special connection to couples. I know you make special effort for couples, married couples. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about the importance of that? Why have you chosen such special emphasis on married couples?
I've always been intrigued with the mystery of marriage, and it really is. How can these two people from two families, two different backgrounds, et cetera, decide to spend the rest of their life together? And so and it truly is, the church is a mystery. And so I've always enjoyed working with couples, preparing them for marriage. That's why college students listening, that was probably one of the most difficult parts of leaving my ministry and coming to a new ministry, is that I wouldn't have a chance to counsel as much, and I wouldn't be able to prepare couples for the sacrament of marriage. But I had that interest from early on in my priesthood, because we, in the church, at least the Catholic Church, we call the sacraments of priesthood or holy orders and the sacrament of marriage as sacraments of service. So they go together. Holy orders, I became more aware of my priesthood and more aware of who I'm called to be as a celibate through my interaction with married couples. That we're not at opposite ends of the spectrum at all. We're very much related, because one is it's about service. If a husband and wife do not know how to serve each other, they're going to be very miserable as husband and wife. And if they can understand that service to each other is service to God, if they're believers, then they'll know that what they give to each other is a gift and not a 50-50 relationship. Because I've never met a couple in which it's 50-50. Sometimes it's 100-0. Depends what's going on in their lives. Because it's always about giving. So people will say, oh, Father Gary, a priest has to give so much, etc. Of course we do. But so do husbands and wives. So I've helped literally probably over thousands of couples in marriage retreats and counseling, et cetera, to understand that. And then I've been very involved for many years with a movement or a program in the Catholic Church called Retrovive for hurting marriages that are broken. I mean, some of them are actually civilly divorced. They say, I want to give it one more try. And so they come to a weekend, and then there are follow-ups, and we tell the story of brokenness. I tell my story of brokenness. The couples that are on the team, they tell their stories of brokenness in their own marriages, and they mentor to other couples. The results are incredible. Even secular counselors will send couples to this Catholic-based program called Retrovive, because it's so powerful. And the whole program is about teaching couples to communicate, meaning, how do you establish a common union? How can you be united as a husband and wife? So I love working with married couples, including even broken marriages, because it teaches me how to be united to God and how to be united to God's people that I serve. And so it's just a powerful ministry for me. And they promised me here in San Antonio that I can eventually start working with the marriage program here as well. I just have to get my bearings, but to figure out what are we doing here in this archdiocese for couples preparing for marriage. A lot of them that go to A&M and all the other universities, so many of them here in San Antonio. And then how can we help couples to become stronger in their marriages? And another connection I've found is that it's the first 7 years of marriage are crucial. That, there's a high divorce rate for couples that are married for those first 7 years. And then after the empty nest, so to speak, when the last child leaves home. And it's a high divorce rate for couples 20, 25 years and older to be married. And there's a high dropout rate for men ordained priests between their ordination and the 7th year. And so there's that connection as well. What happens? Sometimes they leave or they divorce because no one really works with those couples to help them. How now that you're married, how do you turn that romance into the reality of everyday living? And so I've found through the Retrobite program that helped me in my own priesthood that there's a romance stage, then there's disillusionment. And I think anyone who's married knows there's times of disillusionment. And priests will be honest. If they're honest, they'll say, yeah, there are times I get disillusioned. The problem is if we don't take hold of that disillusionment stage and try to figure out, okay, how can we heal? How can we communicate better? How do we go to date nights? How do we take care of ourselves better? Whatever the issue may be, it will fall into, from disillusionment, it will fall into misery. And that's when we get stuck. And if we can't, and that's the toughest stage. So the couples in the Retrobite program will come and they're stuck, like spinning their wheels like a truck in mud, and they're miserable. We help them to go to the last stage, the renewal stage, which is rediscovery, and teach them how to enjoy the romance stage again, but not to be afraid of the disillusionment. And hopefully giving them the skills and the tools so they're not going to fall into misery again. And I think that's my goal in my own personal life, and then help couples and priests and everyone else involved. And that is, let's not be miserable. And sometimes we make ourselves miserable, and you know what, the effect that it has on our mental health. And sometimes we make everyone around us miserable when we're not doing well. That's why balance is so important. We have to take care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, and physically. Otherwise, we're going to suffer the consequences, and everyone we love will suffer as well.
Those words are so impactful, Bishop Gary. I think that for so many, sometimes when individuals, when we talk or you hear about couples therapy or couples counseling, sometimes people just focus on the couples, but all the important levels, all the reasons why it's important, it transcends every relationship. Because not only do couples affect their children, their brothers and sisters, but everyone around them, because if we like it or not, we're all examples to each other.
Absolutely.
And we all have an effect. So for all the reasons that you mentioned, this is so important for people to hear. And it goes beyond marriage, as you said. It's a beautiful thing. And I think for our young people, especially living within a home that maybe there is some difficulties, some turbulence, I think it's important for them to hear messages of hope. And you also mentioned, Bishop Janak, about self-care. Mm-hmm. And I think that's all part of mental wellness as well, emotional wellness. And I think for some of us, when we hear about self-care, I think there's also a perception, sometimes people connote that with being selfish. You're just, being selfish. That's just time, you just want time for yourself. But I think you recognize there's an importance for self-care within yourself so that you can better partner with others, you can better serve others. So can you talk about that level of self-care?
Certainly, because my interest in terms of counseling is with married couples and also with those that are suffering from depression and anxiety and stress. And so a lot of young people, I've counseled with them, college-age students, they're overwhelmed as the world can cause us to be. But so often you can trace it back to the fact that they stopped doing whatever they enjoyed at one point. They stopped eating right, or they stopped running, or they stopped exercising. Father, I used to go and shoot basketball, the hoops for on a Monday, but guys, you got too busy. Except we can't be too busy to take care of ourselves. We can't be so busy that, well, later on, I'll go ahead and take that run, or I'll go exercise, or I'll take that walk, whatever it may be. And then sometimes it's too late. And that's where we can end up being depressed. You know, Valerie, as well as I mean, medication has been helpful to people, psychotropic medication, but help doesn't come in a pill bottle. The fact is, anyone that I've ever worked with that is suffering depression, including clinical depression, the prescription isn't just medication. The prescription also includes getting out and exercising again in whatever format they can do so, maybe walking or whatever it may be, and doing something that they enjoy. And knowing that it goes back to what we said earlier, it's that balance, it's body, mind, spirit. The healing comes not in one form, but in the total format of who we are, the way God created us. And so I'm never afraid to admit, there at probably my 8th, 9th year of priesthood, I was overwhelmed. I suffered anxiety. And I did so about 20 years after that. And the answer for me was running more. I mean, I was always an exerciser. I biked. I was always active because I enjoyed being outside, growing up by the water as we did. But I didn't push myself. And I think we get to a threshold and we kind of say, well, that's what I do. It wasn't enough anymore. And so I had a wonderful parishioner that was also a high school coach. And he taught me how to run. It's not like, well, you know how to run, didn't you? No, not really. And it was literally 1 block at a time, 1 mile at a time. And in 2 years, I ran my first marathon in the Houston Marathon. And it was because he taught me how to breathe. He says it truly is an all-body experience. It's about breathing. It's about the expansion of the lungs. It's about thinking your way through it, knowing the hardest. And anyone who's ever run a marathon knows the hardest part of the marathon is this last 6 miles. It's horrible. We hit that wall, that mile 20, and you realize you have 6 more miles to go. That's not bad. Oh my God, I have 6 more miles to go. and it becomes a total mental game. Even when the legs are throbbing, et cetera, can still run, but it's a mental game. And so that is, I think, in the recovery from any kind of psychological or emotional challenge, be it depression, stress, anxiety. We have to take care of ourselves. People know me. They can call me the Flash, and they know I work a lot and maybe boredom or workaholism at times, but that's how I thrive. I enjoy it. But I also take care of myself. And I splurge at times, and I can have that extra piece of pie or whatever. But for the most part, I'm very mindful of what I put into my body. I'm very mindful of the fact every day I have to exercise. There's no option for me. It's like oxygen for me. Every day I choose to eat, and because I need to, but every day I also choose to exercise, run, walk, bike, whatever it may be. But that's all part of that balance. And self-care is important. It's hard work. And that's why I hope the young people understand, you can't stay in your dorm room or in your apartment all the time. You can't say, well, next week I'll go with the buddies and shoot hoops or whatever. No, you need to go right today. We have to get away from the books. We have to get away from the routine, and we have to take care of ourselves. And it doesn't take that long. We don't have to go run a marathon. 30 minutes makes a big difference in people's lives. And I've just seen a lot of young people let it go. They were so athletic, and all of a sudden they're not anymore. And they wonder why they're so filled with stress and anxiety. And it's not about losing weight or anything else. I don't like that part. You talk about the word diet, immediately people think, oh, I got to lose weight. It's not about that. To me, you have to feel comfortable in your own skin. And if you want to, you're going to shed a few pounds when you start exercising. Oh, good. That's what an extra blessing. But it's more about, to me, the mental state. Because then when we get our mental state right, we're going to take care of our bodies. And I believe what St. Paul says in the New Testament, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. I truly believe that. That's my way of blessing God. My way of blessing God isn't just praying to God. My way is doing what Paul also says, that we glorify God in our body. And I think that's a way of glorification. At 59 years old, as I'm training for a marathon in about 8 months, that's how I glorify God, by taking care of myself. And I have more energy, and I can serve God's people that way. Husbands and wives, when they take care of themselves, they serve their spouse. they serve their children. And it just, we're in better shape. We serve our employer better. We serve our fellow workers a lot better because we're probably in a better mood. So, yes, don't get me started on talking about balance and self-care because it's very biblical.
That's exactly why we wanted you here, because we knew you would do such an excellent job. And I will tell you, I know that your first marathon was the Houston Chevron in 2011.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I ran that one too.
All right, good.
I've run about 6. And so I think 4 of them have been in Houston. And I know about those last 6 miles. And I think that's usually where the underpass is.
Right. Exactly. That's it. You know it. Going through Herman Park. It's horrible. Not Herman Park, Memorial Park, but it's just, 6 miles. But it's anywhere. The best marathon I ever ran, the most exciting one, was in New York City. And the reason I got into New York City is because it was the Boston bombing that year. And everyone dropped out. And some friends of mine, he's a medical doctor, actually there at close to A&M there in Bryan, College Station. And he and his wife were starting to run with me. And they said, let's just do it. Let's just apply for the New York City Marathon. I said, there's no way we're going to get in. I'm not getting in. And we all got in because people dropped out. It was incredible. But regardless of what marathon you run, it's always the last 6 miles. It's just tough. But so is marriage. I once wrote an article for married couples on the last 6 miles because it's like you have to apply the same techniques. When you're ready to walk away, when it's tough, when young people would say, I've had it with that job and I'm not going to do it. It's like, you know what? You've reached that last 6 miles. Think it through. Realize it's not just a mental game, though. You have to understand where's your heart in this and what can you do to kind of breathe yourself through it, so to speak, and put yourself where you need to be in the right frame of mind to make the decision that you need to make. Am I going to finish these last 6 or not? Am I going to stay in this marriage or not? Am I going to stay in this job or this career, whatever it is? And I think we jump too quickly to conclusions because we get afraid of the toughness. It's like, it's difficult to finish the last 6 miles. But Valley, the great payoff. What a feeling it is when you cross that finish line. What it is when that marriage is healed and you realize, I didn't walk away from my commitment. Or when we realize, gosh, I almost gave up that job. I'm so glad I didn't, because they were willing to take that pause, push themselves through it, and realize I can do this. So it's always the last 6 miles.
That is so beautiful. And that's exactly what it is. And that's what that body connection, that running has always been for me, because it almost put my spiritual life in a physical sense.
Right.
It was, putting it in a physical form whenever you just feel like you couldn't take it. You couldn't take one more step. Just put the next foot in front of you. Just put the next foot in front of you.
Right.
And when you physically couldn't, you felt as though you couldn't do it, then you just for me, it was offering myself up, that this is bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you felt weak in that area, then you put it into your body. And then there was that, as far as the spirit or just the determination, it was, although your mind is slipping and your body is failing, you think, no, I will not quit.
I will not quit.
So it's lovely. And I think Travis has a question. Travis?
Yeah. So I had a question, because you grew up in the Palacios area, and then, somewhere down the road, you moved to San Antonio. I was wondering, that experience, how you would give advice to those that are, transitioning into new areas, not knowing people, and the mental health and fatigue that might come with it. Especially with students going off to college, completely new environment, things like that.
Thanks, Trevor. That's so true. Because even though I've lived in San Antonio, I went to school here in the 80s, it's an entirely different city. And then I had to leave my home. I had to leave my diocese and come to a new diocese. I had to leave the priests that became my friends over the years and start meeting new priests. And it is stressful. I can say, I've moved several times in my life as a priest, but it's always been within the same area. This was brand new, having to leave home and come to a new area. And what I've learned is all the more, certainly what we've been talking about, and that is all the more reason why I have to stay on my routine. even though it was a different area, I just keep exercising. The first thing when I got here, I was looking around, where's some good running trails? Where's some good places to go biking? And so immediately, I mean, the second day I was here, I was already back to my regular exercise routine, just a different area. But it's like I didn't stop anything. And then also what helped me with the stress is to find ways to connect with people. And so I just found myself knowing these are all brand new people to me, but yet, you know what? We share a lot in common. So I just tried to listen and I tried to connect with them. And humor is very important to me. I have a weird Jerry Seinfeld kind of sense of humor. I make observations about things, and usually I'm very self-effacing. I will kind of make myself the brunt of the joke. And I found humor as something that's helpful too. And so I got to know the people around here, and I make comments about something on their desk or whatever it may be, and I noticed things about them. Or when they introduced themselves, I made a connection. I was like, oh, I was once there, because San Antonio is a very international city, and the presbyterate here, the priests are from all over the world. And so I try to say, oh, I once met a priest from India. Or it's like, oh, I used to go to Nicaragua. I used to do mission trips there. You're from there? Do you know this place? And it's like, immediately they said, yeah, I do. And it's like we were best friends. So again, it goes back to the listening skills. Find something in common with those around us in your new environment, at the apartment or the condo complex, or in your new place of employment. Find ways in which you're not just sitting here, I don't know anyone. We have to go out of ourselves and say, how can I connect with someone? Because the reality is we all have something in common. We're all human beings. We're all probably in the same shoes in some ways of worries, and we all have problems, et cetera. So how do we connect? Now I'm going to look at not my differences with you, but my similarities. So that's how I do it, Travis. I think that helps our young people to do it as well. Take care of yourself first, do what you know works, and then go meet people and be more interested in them than worrying about yourself.
Thank you.
So running and exercise and all that, I still think. So I have problems quieting my mind. So with yoga, I do a lot better because I'm so focused on, there's a lot of focus on the breathing, right? On the breathing of it, on holding the pose and so forth. But I've tried taking meditation classes. And I've taken all forms of meditation classes, and my mind just doesn't shut up. It just doesn't. And I know my parents went to the local Catholic church. So what recommendations do you have for quieting the mind when we're having problems, just emptying it, of everything, even problems sleeping because your mind just doesn't stop running?
Right. And that's such a good question. And I'm like you. I've taken all kinds of different meditation classes, mindfulness. I've gone to the Jung Institute in Houston, which I think is just incredible. I've also taken some classes taught by Buddhists in terms of meditation. And just because I was interested in how to do that, exactly what you said, because I believe in the formula of the way I was taught in my training, thoughts plus feelings equals our behavior. So we can't control our feelings, but our feelings come from our thoughts. And so I can control my thoughts. I can't control all the thoughts that come into my mind, but I can control those that do come and that surface. But the mind I have found in my life as a priest and as a counselor is that the mind seems to be racing even more today. And therefore it goes back to what I said earlier, and that is, what are we putting into our minds? And that is the stimuli. I think we're overly stimulated. So what's helped me to settle my mind is that I'm very conscious of what I put into it. And so I don't watch a lot of television. I just really don't. I don't get overwhelmed. I don't watch 5, 6, 7 hours of the news as some people will do. I just don't do it. I'm conscious of the fact that when I do, my mind seems to race a lot more. So I find a routine. I'll read the news. I want to be informed every day. It's important that I do that. But I find other ways when I'm away from work. I enjoy reading. When I exercise, I do not put earbuds in. I do not listen to music. I do not listen. Oh, don't you listen to podcasts? Don't you listen to books on tape when you're running? I said, absolutely not. I listen. I don't put anything in my ears. And that's helped me to actually cleanse myself, kind of empty my mind. So I found that, at least for myself, the secret is I have to evaluate what am I putting into my mind in terms of what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what I'm listening to, and being minimalistic. I kind of go on that other side. I minimalize what I'm putting into my mind, and I maximize what is good for me. And that is sometimes just plain quiet time. So every morning with my cup of tea, I will take at least 10 minutes. If I have a little bit more time, fine, but probably not more than 15 or 20 minutes of just total silence. And that is, that's a form of prayer for me, but I don't say prayers. I don't read anything. I try not to think anything. I just listen, and I focus on my breathing. And I'm very mindful of my setting, and I find myself relaxing a lot better that way. And so I just welcome the quiet. So some of the things that I do to kind of quiet the racing mind, which is so evident for so many of us.
Bishop Janak, as we are trying to be mindful of your time, because we would love to continue talking to you, but I know you were so generous even giving us this time today.
I enjoy it.
But as my colleagues, as they gather their thoughts for any additional questions, I also want to make sure that we've addressed anything that you would like to cover, everything that it is that you would like to cover. So is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to touch on? I do want to make sure we leave time for you to talk about the Emmaus Center.
Sure.
That is in Victoria. But is there anything beyond that you feel it is important that our audience hears from you?
My heart really is with our young people, your college students, university students. And I just want them to know I pray for them every day, and also encourage them, I challenge them to take care of themselves in body, mind, and spirit, to know that there's so much stimuli that we didn't have when we were growing up. And I'm conscious of that fact. And also just to let them understand there's such power in moderation. I'm not one that is a real stickler for fasting too much, et cetera. Some of my brother priests, they're great fasters, et cetera, and those in religious communities. I don't do well. I've got to eat. But I think mindful meaning, I'm not one to say, well, I will never drink, whatever. I enjoy the occasional glass of wine, and I enjoy my social time with friends. I think everything has a purpose and a place. But what gets young people into trouble so often is that they lose sight of that moderation understanding, and they stop taking care of themselves. And it's living in that moment is important. I think young people teach me a lot about how to do that, because sometimes I live too much into the future, too much for tomorrow. Appreciating today is important. Jesus talks about that so much. But we also have to be mindful of the fact that the choices I make today will affect my future tomorrow. And sometimes my heart hurts for young people, because gosh, I did that 10 years ago. And now all of a sudden, this job interview, I don't think I got the job because they did a search of my record or a background check or whatever. And I was so stupid to do that, et cetera. It's like, I understand, but some things can't be changed. And so I always say to young people, make good choices. Enjoy life. Enjoy your college years. Gosh, they're wonderful years. But do things in moderation, things that you're not going to regret. And do things that are going to help you to understand it's not just about me. It's got to be about other people too. We never want to be self-centered. We never want to be full of ourselves, that we are not mindful of the goodness of other people. So that's why I always tell them, listen to other people. Listen to your parents, listen to your teachers, listen to those that are older than you. Sometimes maybe they don't know, but for the most part, there's wisdom in years. And so learn to be a better listener. And I think they'll be a lot happier as well. So my heart goes out to our young people. They're wonderful. I love them. I'm so proud of them and what they're doing. And they are our future. And I'm counting on them. We all are. And we want them to be healthy and want them to be really solid in their life. So I'll make sure I say that.
That's wonderful. And I just want to take this time as we wrap up and give my team members an opportunity to add any additional questions. But I just want to say to you, our most beloved Bishop Janak. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we're so happy that you're in your new role. That only means more contact and more influence you'll have on more individuals. I know it was very hard for Victoria to let you go. And but thank you so much for making time for us today and sharing your very wise words. And again, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I knew that you would be the most excellent person to have on, and I feel that it was almost it was such a blessing that I even came upon, because again, although this is the month, over this past year and a half, it was something that had been weighing on me, on us, that we find an individual to really talk about these issues, because so many of it, not only just our colleagues, but again, as you mentioned, students that we've come across that are really been troubled with this time. And we wanted to make sure that we found the right person to deliver these messages. And thank you for being that right person. And again, for saying yes. It's such an honor having you.
And I just have to say one last thought is that let's pray that we're never afraid to get the help that we need. I pray one day that stigma will be totally removed from seeking counseling, and that people will go and get the help long before it's really bad. But to know that there's nothing wrong, it's good, it's healthy to go and speak to a professional when needed. And sometimes preventive medicine is better than when we're in the course of a full-fledged clinical depression or whatever the situation may be. So in this month of mental health awareness, it's like, go get help when needed, and don't be afraid. No one's going to judge you. So
thank you for that.
Sure.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening in today. We, again, are so fortunate to have Bishop Janak with us. And I would say, I think we'll all agree that he illuminated our path today on our path to most persistence. So again, thank you. Listeners, please listen to this and all of our other podcasts, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. The Nuclear Power Institute is a joint center with Texas A&M University and the Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, and is a component of the Nuclear Engineering and Science Center. For more information about our center or about our guest speaker today, please visit our website at npi.tamu.edu and look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you.